serious technique.
You could be
Why
like
did they
the
drown
voice
in the
box
flood?
that allows an artist to
You
see.
see, all flesh was corrupted according to Genesis 6, verse 12.
Well, maybe you wouldn't be the
So this
actual
idea, the
voice.
Sethite view, as it's called, if you start examining it from a textual basis, falls apart. It makes no sense. Now, the inferred godliness of Seth is suspect because who was his son? Remember, see, only Enoch and Noah's 8 were spared. Noah and his 3 sons, there's 4 people, and their 4 wives. 8 people in that ark. Enoch's pulled out ahead of time. Those 8 are miraculously preserved in the ark. But where are the Sethites if there's such good? Remember, the Nephilim took wives as they chose. And why did the Sethites perish in the flood? And by the way, something else you may recall from last session, Enosh, which was Seth's son, is the guy that initiated the defiance of God. He's the first apostate. That last verse in chapter 4 is mistranslated. In the days of Enosh, men began to call upon the name of the Lord. That's mistranslated. They began to defy, call upon idols. Very important translation, as you talked about last time. Men began to profane the name of the Lord, according in Genesis 4:26. That's the Targum of Angelos, which is in the Jewish community regarded as the translation. The Targum of Jonathan, Kimchi, Rashi, and the other rabbinical scholars all agree. Jerome agrees. Maimonides, which is probably the most venerated of the Hebrew sages of the 12th century, in his commentary on the Mishnah. The point is, the ancient Hebrew sages understood the angel view. That's the main point I'm getting here. And daughters of Cain is the concept. There's not a subset of the daughters of Adam. Cainites were not necessarily godless. Remember, Cain, yes, he murdered his brother, but remember how that chapter ends with his genealogy. He names his son with the name of God in it. He was a repentant believer. Yes, he did murder, and yes, he suffered for it, but his children were God-fearing, apparently, at least some of them. And the other question about the daughters of Seth that they don't have an answer for, were the daughters of Seth so unattractive? Why are the Sethite leadership going after daughters of Cain? What's wrong with the daughters of Seth? Are they ugly, or what's wrong? Anyway, but the unnatural offspring is the final nail in the coffin of the Sethite thing. The supernatural offering. The text implies that the offering, the Nephilim, were the mighty men, the Hagabarim. And to give you an example of one is Goliath. He was a descendant of Anak. Anak was one of the Nephilim. And of course, this whole issue of no chromosomes among the Sethites. There were no women of renown, men of renown, right? No women of renown. And so and then the other question is, what made Noah's genealogy so distinctive that it gets a mention in verse 9? Because it was unblemished. These others were blemished. Now the New Testament, as I point out, confirms this 3 times. In Jude 6 and 7, we looked at that. 1 Peter 3:19 and 20, and 2 Peter 2 verses 4 and 5. So we went through those. Now the angel view before Christ is all through the traditional rabbinical literature. It's in the book of Enoch, as I mentioned before. It's the testimony of the 12 patriarchs. It's in Josephus. Josephus talks this clearly. He takes for granted the angel view in his writings. And the Septuagint, as I mentioned. So if you look at the record that we would regard as useful, it clearly it knows no other view than really the angel view. The church fathers in the early church, Philo of Alexandria, Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Athenagoras, Tertullian, Lactantius, and Ambrose is missing. It should be Ambrose, and Julian. Let's talk about modern day.
Now that
if you read the writings of G.H. Pember, M.R.D. Hall, C.H. McIntosh, Dillitch, Kyle and Dillitch are the authoritative commentaries in the Old Testament in most seminary libraries. Gaebelein, Arthur W. Pink, Donald Gray Barnhouse, Henry Morris down in San Diego, Merrill Unger, expert on demonology, Arnold Fruchtenbaum, one of the greatest contemporary Jewish scholars and knows his Bible, and Hal Lindsey, Chuck Smith. I had a guy that didn't really buy this, a good friend of mine, is a guy by the name of Tim LaHaye. And Tim and I used to have some discussions, and he wouldn't fight me on it. He just couldn't quite. I got a letter from him just a couple of days ago. The subject of the letter was somebody who was congratulating us on the verdict that we got in the trials. But he also, in the letter, says, Chuck, you finally convinced me, because he's apparently, for some other reasons, he's doing some research and some writing, and he's got all our tapes, he's gone through them 3 times, and he finally, in his letter, you finally convinced me on the angels of Genesis 6. And so I could add his name here too, I suppose. But anyway, So the Sethite view is shattered by the text itself, by the inferred separation, by the inferred godliness of Sethites, the inferred Canaanite subset of the Adamites, the unnatural offspring called Nephilim, New Testament confirmations. But here is the real shocker to me. Up till now, that was my view. But as I've been doing some homework in recent years, I also realized you will not understand what happened after the flood and most of the prophecies through the Old Testament unless you understand this background. If you miss this, so I always felt, well, okay, there's two different views. I hold this one, they hold that one, who cares, let's go on. I discovered, no, this turns out to be important foundation to understand the rest of the Old Testament. Because you're going to run into, in the Old Testament, a term called the Rephaim. The word Repha means dead.
Great taste.
It also means, it can mean ghost or spirit. But it's often, the Rephaim are the dead ones. But see, they're the walking dead, you'll discover. In Genesis 6:4, when we talked about the Nephilim, it says, and also after that. After the flood, we run into people called the Rephaim. Now, one of the questions that lurks behind this study will be, who built the ancient monuments? You know, the world is littered with monuments that defy explanation. Not just the Great Pyramid and Stonehenge. There are palaces and things and temples in which the rocks are the size of boxcars. And they come from hundreds of miles away. And there's all kinds of theories, but the truth is no one really knows how these things were built. And this doesn't explain it, but it begins to, there's a hint that there's, see, the Great Pyramid of Giza is one, the Stonehenge in Britain. And there's a circle of what's known as a circle of Rephaim up in the Golan Heights. Nan and I were up there once, we got a 4x4, and we went up there, and this is an area, you can't tell this from the ground. When you're in the air, you realize it's a Stonehenge-type structure. It's called the Gilgal Rephaim. It's up in the Golan Heights, up near Bashan. We're going to talk more about that as we go. There are 5 circles that involve 20-ton stones. The diameter is about 155 meters. It's dated to about 3000 BC. It's built on a flat plateau. It's only visible, you can only tell its architecture when we're getting above it. And it's about 10 miles from Ashtaroth, Karnaim. And it's in Genesis, Joshua. We won't spend a lot of time on it here. There's some other ruins. These have never been excavated, by the way, because they're up there up in the Golan, where it's the tension. When we take some pictures, there were shells dropping about 1,000 yards away. Training stuff, but still. After the flood, it says also after that, we discover, you'll be introduced in Genesis 14, there's at least 4 tribes. The Rephaim, the Emim, the Horim, and the Zamzumim. That God instructs Joshua to wipe out every man, woman, and child of those certain tribes. When you read that in the Old Testament, as a New Testament reader, it's hard to relate to that. Because they are instructed not to compromise, to wipe out every man, woman, child. And you need to understand, you won't understand that unless you realize there's a gene pool problem. When we get to Genesis 15, God is going to give Abraham, Genesis 12, 15, and 17, deals with God's covenant with Abraham, where he commits the land to Abraham. And he tells Abraham what's going to happen. You're going to go away, and your descendants will come back here after 400 years. He goes to that prophecy. Well, when God tells Abraham that, Satan suddenly knows that he's got 4 centuries to lay down a minefield. And so the mischief that led to the flood of Noah, that was worldwide, which was taken care of by the flood, that same mischief apparently was indulged in the land of Canaan to provide these giants to prevent Israel from taking its possession. Satan has always tried to oppose God's plan, and he gave that land to Israel. So in those days, he had these giants. Today, he's got the PLO and the UN. But let's move on. In Numbers 13, remember when Moses sent the 12 spies out, and Joshua and Caleb said, let's go get them, God's with us. But the other 10 were terrified. They said, we are as grasshoppers in their sight. Why? Verse 33 of Numbers 13, there were Nephilim in the land. The actual Hebrew word is used there. And Arba, Anak, and his 7 sons were known as the sons of Anak, or the Anakim. They were encountered in Canaan. Their descendants, you will remember. One had a group of brothers. His name was Goliath, right? And so on. So These guys are 10, 13 feet tall. These are not just overgrown. These aren't basketball guys. These are a different way to live. There was a king, Og, the king of Bashan. Up in the Golan Heights, the biblical area is called Bashan. And Og, the king of Bashan, is known in Deuteronomy 3 and Joshua 12 and elsewhere as the king of the giants. He was the king of these gigantic races that were derivative from some kind of undisclosed mischief by these angels again, by Satan's emissaries, and Goliath and his 4 brothers. So when you read all about David, he goes as a kid, he's going to take on Goliath. Notice when he stops at that brook, he picks up 5 stones. How many did he need for Goliath? 1. What did the other 4 were not to faith? No. He was ready for all of them. You go inside this time. You can study the Bible from cover to cover in terms of Satan's strategy to try to thwart the plan of God. As God reveals that there's going to be a Redeemer, the seed of the woman, Satan knew he had to deal with the human race. The corruption of Adam's line was his first shot, apparently. Well, maybe Cain and Abel was part of it, by corrupting the firstborn there. Abraham's seed, when God starts to tell Abraham, that calls Abraham, tells him if the Redeemer is going to come from his seed, then Abraham allows Satan to focus his attack now, not on everybody, just on Abraham. The famine in Genesis 50 and others. When you get to Exodus, the destruction of the male line by Pharaoh. It's all part of Satan's provocation. Even after Pharaoh lets him go on Passover, he changes his mind, goes after it. Right? To what? To wipe them out. Pharaoh's
What
pursuit,
are we
Exodus
doing
14.
So,
And then, of course, the whole population of Canaan, to prevent them from getting in there, is part of what we're going to be dealing with here. When God finally revealed that
Did I
it's going
just
to be
land
not
on you? That was
Abraham,
funny.
Isaac, Jacob, and through the tribe of Judah, even anytime God does it, allows Satan to focus. But when he reveals that it's going to be out of the house of David, that in 2 Samuel 7, that allows Satan to focus his attacks on the house of David. And in the royal line, again and again and again, we find the royal kids, the heirs to the throne, are killed. There's an attempt to wipe out all the heirs, except always there's a servant that hides a baby. There's all kinds of these, all through there are these intrigues. The Arabians slew all but Azariah, who was hidden. Athaliah, she ends up killing everybody, but Joash escapes. Hezekiah is assaulted in Isaiah 36 and 38. Remember, you get to the Persian Empire. Haman is trying to wipe out the entire Jewish race. Why? Well, it's prejudice. No, it's something more deeper than not just that simple. It's an attempt to thwart the plan of God. And you wonder, why is Satan still at it today? Because there's a prerequisite condition for the second coming of Christ. That's for Israel to repent and to ask him to return. And they will. But it'll take the tribulation to drive them to it. In the New Testament, Joseph fears when Mary's pregnant. That was punishable by death. He fears for her. Matthew 1st. Herod's attempt to killing the babes at Bethlehem. Celebrate every Christmas that comes up. That's Satan's attempt to thwart the plan of God. At Nazareth, when Jesus opens his ministry in Luke 4, they try to throw him off a cliff. Then there's storms at sea, and by the way, there's 2 of them, not just one. In Mark 4 and Luke 8, you'll discover if you study those storms, they were not, in my opinion, natural storms. Why? Because there were sailors aboard that are familiar with those waters that knew about storms, and they were terrified. That tells me something else is going on. They were supernaturally induced, I believe. And that's why Jesus rebukes the storm. Interesting. Check the words. And of course, the ultimate strategy was the cross.
That looks bad.
And all of this is summarized for you in Revelation 12. And Revelation's got this dramatic book, but there's a chapter set aside, chapter 12, where it reviews from the seed of the woman until the rapture. In fact, beyond the rapture. So Satan's still at it. He's not through. What does the Golan Heights, Hebron, and the Gaza Strip have in common? You read those in the news lately? They were the areas that Joshua failed to exterminate the Rephaim in Joshua 15 and so forth. If you do a study of the book of Judges, the strongholds that failed to defeat Israel completely in the book of Judges are the parts that are colored on the map. Those are the territories that to this day are still remaining in dispute. Now, where's the capital? In Jericho. That's what we mean by it. Interesting. Isn't that fascinating? I think it's then tell me demons are not territorial. There is a very, very strange verse in Psalm 22. I always read Psalm 22. It sounds as if it was dictated first person singular by Jesus as he hung on the cross. It opens up with, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And it closes with, it's done, it's finished. And but in the middle, and we always look at that with great, it's incredible as you go through that. But right in the middle of it, there's a strange verse in verse 12. Jesus apparently saying, many bulls have compassed me. Strong bulls of Bashan have beset me. Now Bashan is what we call the Golan Heights, and it was well known as cattle-raising country. Bulls of Bashan was an idiom. It may be that's what he means. A bunch of cattle down there? I don't think so. I suspect, don't know this, I'm just guessing here, but I suspect this is a demonic phrase. And the bulls of Bashan is referring to something supernatural. There's another issue that surprises me that more experts, people who have really specialized in this field, have not seen the discernment. And that's the distinction between fallen angels and demons. All through the Bible we find fallen angels. We just talked a lot about them so far today. When you get New Testament, we run into these strange things that we generally call demons. Are they equivalent or are they distinctive? There are experts, no longer being one of them, that's the world, is technology, that don't make the distinction I'm going to suggest to you here, so you have to decide for yourself. The nature of angels. What do we know about angels? We go through the Bible and discover they always appear in human form. They never look like angels.
Freedom reign.
They normally look like human form. In Sodom and Gomorrah, they're always in pairs, too, Mr. Barber. Sodom and Gomorrah, at the resurrection, we were there, a couple of them. At the ascension, there's a couple of them, right? Always look like men, right? They spoke, so you can understand them. They took men by the hand. They ate meals with them, right? Paul even admonishes you in his New Testament epistles in terms of hospitality. Many of you entertained angels unawares. That's Paul's perception there, okay? They are capable of direct physical combat. The Passover in Egypt was accomplished by an angel doing the Lord's bidding. Angel of death, they was referred to in something. One night after dinner, one angel slaughters 185,000 Syrian soldiers. I don't know how many soldiers were there. It wouldn't surprise me if they stole every other throat. That's what the churches do, just to scare everybody to death. They wake up and that's the demoralizing part. Because the word gets around. But anyway, the slaughter of 185,000. You don't mess with angels. By the way, Jesus said they don't marry. That causes a lot of confusion. I'll come back to that. He says the angels in heaven don't marry. But angels are always referred to in the masculine. And you say, well, that's just a figure of speech. No. Study carefully Genesis 19. What the homosexuals of that city wanted Lot to deliver his guests. So they brought out to the wild. Now, in contrast to these things, when we run into demons in the New Testament, they're very different. They seem to be powerless except to the extent they can indwell someone. They apparently always seek embodiment. That's why they petitioned to go into the swine and all that, in Gadara. You know the story. Jesus said, for in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God. He's referring to believers. I mean, in the resurrection, they neither marry or given in marriage, but are as angels of God in heaven. Meaning, what he means by that is they are immortal. You don't, someone that is mortal needs to procreate. Someone that's immortal doesn't procreate. That's his point. Now, he doesn't say, he's talking about the angels that are in heaven, the ones that are well behaved. I personally would not put any limitations on the technology available to an angel that's bent on mischief. That's my real point, I think. The word habitation, I've covered this before, the akaterion refers to the body as a dwelling place for the spirit. It occurs only twice. In Jude 6, which the angels disrobed, and in 2 Corinthians 5:2, the heavenly body to which we as believers long to be clothed with. And the word habitation in one place is the same as the word house in the other place. Well, let's back up a little bit.
Join the beer gang if you need money.
When we were in Genesis 3, verse 15, we had God declaring war on Satan. He said, I'll put enmity between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed. And he shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Everybody quotes this as the first link in the chain of prophecies about Jesus Christ, and that's where he gets the title, the seed of the woman. But many people miss that there's two seeds here. There's the seed of the woman, and there's the seed of the serpent. He later is called the Red Dragon in Revelation 12. He's the coming world leader, I call him. I don't like the term Antichrist because it's too limiting. And he has a sidekick by the name of the false prophet. So with Satan and the coming world political leader and the false prophet at his side, you've got a satanic counterfeit of a trinity. Everything Satan does is a counterfeit. And these are the forces behind the world today. And Daniel chapter 10 is your recommended study on the details of all of that. When you get to Daniel 2, and Daniel, we have the famous event of Daniel 2 is by way of review. We have Babylon, Persia, Greece, then Rome in two phases. In Daniel chapter 7, it's laid out, same subject, different idioms, but again, we have those same empires. But we get to these, in Daniel 2, we have the iron mixed with clay, remember? There's all this speculation. We have, the head we know is gold, is Babylon, the silver is Persia, the brass is green, the legs are iron, but the feet are iron mixed with clay. What on earth is the clay? And I've taught this for 30 years before I realized Daniel explains what the clay is. And of course, the last two are two phases of the same empire. But we know that we're heading for a world order, a world without borders. We talked about that a lot. The whole idea of these things are, and it's coming. Global government's happening for at least 3 reasons. The nuclear proliferation is part of it. You've got to have global governments. Terrorism is worldwide.
How you doing?
But there's also a possibility that we're going to be unified in a world government for a cosmic threat. John MacArthur said that. Reagan said it 3 times in public speeches. Many people miss that. But one thing we know this world will be a threat from the outside. We'll get back to this. What is the mighty clay? Daniel 2. See, it's all in Aramaic, not Hebrew. And Daniel 2 is 7 is the Gentile language of the day. Aramaic, not Hebrew. Mighty clay is the clay made from lumber. Very different. When you get to Daniel chapter 2, verse 43, I remember I must have read this hundreds of times over 30 years and never noticed what it said. Shame on me. And Daniel's interpreting this vision. He says, whereas thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. Whoops. Wait a minute. What did he say? See, it's a person. The clay represents some kind of people. It's miry clay, they, switches to a personal pronoun, shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. In order to mingle with the seed of men, they have to be something other than the seed of men. I have had this checked by experts. That's what the Hebrew requires. Whatever they are, they're not the seed of men. What are they? I don't know. Are they Nephilim? Possibly.
Mayan symbolism.
Are they genetically engineered clones? Possibly. But whatever they are, the character, the relative distinctions is substantial. Whereas I saw the elements with fiery colors and mingle some of the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with another. Mingle some of the seed of men.
Well, I'm not ruling out
See, there is going to be a restraint. All of the restraint will be removed. Unless you're leader until you take it away, and then shall the wicked one be revealed. That's this we often call the Antichrist, who's coming back to the word of Satan with all power. Wow. All power and signs. Be prepared for this political leader to do Where does the Antichrist come from? Everybody misses this. He did Revelation 13. Wait a minute. Revelation 11 is where he's first introduced in Revelation. Verse 7. When they shall have finished, speaking of the 2 witnesses, when they have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. That's, of course, the Antichrist finally kills 2 witnesses. Where does he come out? Out of the ocean.
Shit, man!
Revelation 17, the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, or the perdition of all the wonder whose name did not written in the book of life. Because they received not the love of the truth that they might be saved, for this cause God will send them a strong delusion that they should believe he lied. Not alien.
Dude, it's fucking weird. It's like a landing strip in the desert.
Close with, when I get back to finishing up the last few verses of the chapter. You don't always the first 4 verses. But what I want you to do tonight and get some temper.
Get out of the fucking basket, Sarge.
I want you to diagram how you speak.
I flipped him out of it earlier. Go flip him out of
I
it.
need some wheatgrass, tofu, and some chia seeds.
The summary opens up as follows. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break the bands asunder and cast away the cords from us. It goes on. You diagram this, you discover it's a discussion among the Trinity. Part of this is the Father, part of the Son.
Hey, wanna do these cards with me?
And we take that little short diagram, figure out who's saying what to who. But this is talking about what I consider the most absurd world. Imagine our world is God, of course, so we just put it somewhere. But the most ridiculous world is this one. I can understand people not believing in God. I can understand people being disobedient to God. What I cannot imagine in my mind is the worst. Knowing, taking up arms against.
Yeah, it's bad the first 3 weeks, but after that, it's cool.
Why do the heathen world and people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against who? Against the Lord and his anointed. That's what the word Christ means. It says, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords. We're going to throw off the shackles of God.
We're having a full moon party in the desert.
The rest of the song deals with
Interested?
it. Let's get back to finish up the chapter. The rest of the God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was either only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And this, of course, the word is repented is the term which is a microphone which describes anthropologically as God having suffered heart-rendering disappointment. Literally, it speaks of taking a deep breath in extreme pain. That's what it really means. So you say God can't repent. You know, we use that word in a different sense. It's an anthropomorphism to how God felt. God was hurt. It grieved him at his heart. The Lord said, I will destroy man from whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace. These are generations of Noah. Noah was a just man, but the generations of Noah were from God. Perfect means of Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence, and God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. For all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. By the way, that verse also shreds the second part. You're good, guys. You're good, Lord. Just 13. God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher. Room shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. Now the word ark here is given. It came down from the Latin arcus, it's a chest or coat. The word for ark in the Ark of the Covenant is a different word. But obviously it's what you and I would properly call a barge. It's not a boat, it's not clothes, it's just a barge. And it's, by the way, it's been studied like man by the architects. The portions of the word. I want you to notice now, we'll talk about it more next time, thou shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. If you make a boat, where do you pitch the boat? Where do you put the waterproof in? Yeah, but this is on both sides, isn't it? Why do you suppose that's pitched within and without?